So in a previous Zombicide Black Plague vlog here on my channel, we looked at the game from the perspective of being a completionist, acquisition. You've got the core, and then pushing out from there, growing your collection, and purchasing obtaining the various expansions and add-ons to the game. I want to complement that podcast and share my thoughts on how to mix and match the various components. Not so much for game balance, because there is a little bit of swing in there, depending on the cards that you draw, depending on the heroes, depending on what's in play. Although on the opposite side, to counter that, there are some very, very definitive tactics in Zombicide Black Plague, so it's not just roll and move and draw cards on there. Yet at the same time, to have a challenging game, I've noticed over dozens and dozens of plays, both as a solo player and with the gaming group, certainly Black Plague is one of our favorite games, there's an order to things. There's a couple of checkpoints to keep in mind if you want to challenge yourself, but just don't go overboard. Now, in some of the bigger games, we really have mixed in all of the expansions, and it's just a crazy, crazy mess on there, and it's a great opportunity to explore. It creates a lot of fun, but you have to kind of go into that with the understanding that there's just going to be so much coming at you. It's essentially a heroic last stand on there. So you have to be willing to sink in maybe an hour, 2, 3 hours of gameplay and realize probably every single time you're going to get utterly destroyed. And it's a lot of fun on there. But approaching things a little bit more realistically, I consider the core and Wolfsburg to be just auto-includes on there. Yes, you're going to add the Wolf Abomination. Yes, you're going to add the Zombie Wolves. They're a little bit faster. They give a little bit more diversity, teaming up very well with the runners on there. But the additional characters, more importantly, the items, the magic items, the spells, the abilities, that pushes the game a lot further. And I at this point, I really can't see playing the core just with the core. Not that it's limited, not that it's crippled in any way, but having that solid foundation and enough diversity of items and characters and spawns and things like that to push forward, that's really the solid base. On there, the next thing to add, in my mind, is abominations. Do you want to replace the super abomination in the core or the wolf abomination and replace it with the minotaur or the troll, kind of pushing out on there? I have played with two. I have found it to be a little bit overpowering, especially early on in the beginning. If you get that draw of an abomination and you don't have an effective way to deal with it, that's challenging. It happens. But when that happens, if there's only one in the deck, now that switches the tactics. You're going to run and gun. You're going to have to be highly mobile. You're going to have to be really, really pushing through, essentially running away from it until you can get certain items and destroy it or just make it to the end game. You still have tactics. But if you draw early on an abomination and you're running and gunning and then you draw a second one, it is just too overpowering. So I like to kind of randomly take the abomination cards, mix them up under the table, and slip it into the deck on there, and of course, shuffle it through. So you have that, I really don't know what's in play. Let's find out, or I should say, let's not find out. If I was going to mix two in, and you might mix two in just because you want the challenge. You might mix two in because it's a veteran group of players. You might mix two in because you've gone above the recommended number of players. You want to do a bigger game. One of my rules in any board game is everybody plays. Everybody that wants to sit down at the table with Fritz, we're playing. That means we'll tweak the rules. That means we'll kind of push things a little bit. Maybe the game isn't as optimal. Maybe it's a little bit easier. But it's about the social aspects on there. So if certainly we're going to bump it up above the players, again, having Core and Wolfsburg will let you take your games bigger. Maybe we throw in another spawn point. Maybe we double spawn somewhere. Maybe we throw in two abominations. So throwing in two, I do the Core from the set or from Wolfsburg. And then I'll do one of the more powerful ones, again, the Minotaur or the Troll. So that's going to push that experience out on there. Now we move into the choice between the Deadeye Walkers, skeleton archers, or the zombie crows. I was going to say murder of crows, but that's Zombicide modern. This is now going to add either more ranged or fast moving with the ability to move through certain objects on there. It's going to add a new timer to the game. And what I mean by timer is, as these spawns happen, you're calculating, okay, there's a mass of zombies over there. On average, what's the spawn ratio? How soon is it going to get to where I am on the table? How is it going to spill over to where I'm going? And as you try to make these calculations, and they adjust based on how you move and what you kill and how things operate, then some long-range stuff like the skeleton archers or the crows appear, and it just plays havoc and messes with that calculation. So I like to add in one or the other on there. Let's talk NPCs, notoriously plagued characters. I want to say non-player characters. It's that D&D spilling over into me. I enjoy playing with them. I do. I think it adds a little bit of a mini game on there. It gives the players some choices. Occasionally you'll have some players go off and kind of hunt on their own, but it changes just the regular zombies away from regular zombies. So I like to mix those in no matter what is happening. I will say, on a side note, in terms of actual physical time playing the game, when you mix in NPC zombies, players tend to go after them a little bit more. You'll see at various points in the game where you've shut down some spawn points, or you've had 2 or 3 turns where there weren't as many active spawns. There'll be some small pockets of zombies, almost what I call bait zombies. A couple of small pockets where you can, especially as you level up and get a little bit more movement and raise the threat level, where you can kind of run over there, smash those couple of zombies, and get back next turn. You can engage them. You don't have to for the mission. Effectively, you can ignore them. But I find when that happens, when those pocket spawns happen, and there's some NPC zombies, players will go after them because you want that little bit of XP. You want to earn that draw on the items and stuff like that. It causes the game to run a little bit hotter. It causes the game to run a little bit longer in terms of time. So that's something I just try and keep in mind from that perspective. But I do consider both of those auto-include with how we want to run the game. And then, of course, now the guest boxes. So depending on acquisition, when do we mix these in? The player box 1 characters, they're kind of interesting. It adds a little bit more of a choice, but they're really on par with the core characters from Black Plague Core and from Wolfsburg. The guest box characters, all of them, they all have different power levels, but they all tend to be significantly more powerful than the base characters on there. Not that the base characters are bad, but with the abilities, and you see some unlocks and you see some different combos that you wouldn't necessarily see in the core characters, it does make the game a little bit easier. Now, it's far from an auto win, but it makes the game slightly easier. So you might want to take that into account depending on the difficulty and how you want to modify it, whether you want a really challenging game or maybe a little bit easier type game on there if you're going a little bit more social, using those characters to adjust and play. So we're going to push this up to the podcast. We're going to put it in the board games playlist here on my channel. And Zombicide Black Plague, the link underneath this vlog takes you back to my blog where we've got a lot of Black Plague, pushing that out, playing it, order of acquisition, various missions, and exploring it on there. And then I'm going to turn it over to the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback in what you think on the various boxes and the various expansions for the game.